Paulo Freire, 1921–1997, was a Brazilian educator, philosopher, and social theorist, widely regarded as one of the most influential educational thinkers of the 20th century. His groundbreaking work in critical pedagogy, particularly his book Pedagogy of the Oppressed, revolutionized education by emphasizing dialogue, empowerment, and social justice. Below is a comprehensive account of his life, from his early years to his lasting legacy. Early life, 1921–1940s. Paulo Regis Neves Freire was born on September 19, 1921, in Recife, Pernambuco, a city in Brazil's impoverished northeast. He grew up in a middle-class family, the youngest of 4 children. His father, Joaquim Temistocles Freire, was a military police officer, and his mother, Edeltrudes Neves Freire, was a homemaker known for her kindness and religious devotion. The family's financial stability crumbled during the Great Depression, which began in 1929, plunging them into poverty. This experience profoundly shaped Freire's understanding of social inequality and suffering. As a child, Freire witnessed hunger and hardship, both in his own family and among the poor communities in Recife. These experiences instilled in him a deep empathy for the marginalized. Despite financial struggles, his parents prioritized education, and Freire was an avid reader, influenced by his mother's Catholic faith and his father's more liberal, spiritual outlook. He attended primary school in Recife but struggled academically due to poverty-related challenges, including hunger, which he later said affected his ability to concentrate. In his teens, Freire's family situation improved slightly, and he began to excel in school. He developed a passion for language and literature, particularly Portuguese, which would later influence his teaching methods. By the late 1930s, he was teaching Portuguese grammar to younger students to help support his family. He also became interested in philosophy, reading works by thinkers like Karl Marx and Antonio Gramsci, which shaped his views on social structures and power dynamics. Education and early career, 1940s–1950s. Freire studied law at the University of Recife, now part of the Federal University of Pernambuco, enrolling in 1943. However, his true passion lay in education and philosophy, not legal practice. While at university, he also studied philosophy and the psychology of language, which deepened his interest in how people learn and communicate. During this period, he met Elza Maia Costa de Oliveira, a schoolteacher, whom he married in 1944. They had 5 children, and Elza's work as an educator further inspired Freire's career path. After graduating, Freire briefly worked as a lawyer but soon abandoned it to focus on education. In 1946, he took a job with the Social Service of Industry, SESI, a government organization in Pernambuco aimed at improving workers' welfare. As a teacher and administrator, Freire worked with poor and working-class families, where he began developing his ideas about education as a tool for social change. He observed that traditional education often reinforced class divisions, alienating students from their own realities. This led him to question the banking model of education, where teachers deposit knowledge into passive students. During the 1950s, Freire continued his work with SESI and pursued graduate studies in education. He also engaged with Catholic social movements, which were gaining traction in Brazil and advocating for the poor. His exposure to liberation theology, a movement that linked Christian teachings with social justice, further shaped his philosophy. By this time, Freire was experimenting with adult literacy programs, focusing on teaching reading and writing in ways that empowered learners to critically engage with their world. Literacy campaigns and pedagogy of the oppressed, 1960s. The 1960s marked a turning point in Freire's career. In the early 1960s, Brazil was undergoing significant political and social changes, with growing demands for land reform and workers' rights. Freire became deeply involved in adult literacy campaigns, particularly in Brazil's northeast, where illiteracy rates were high among rural and urban poor communities. Freire developed an innovative approach to literacy education, emphasizing conscientization in Portuguese, a process of raising critical awareness about social and political realities. Instead of teaching rote memorization, he used generative words, drawn from learners' everyday lives, such as work, land, or hunger, to teach reading and writing while fostering discussions about social issues. His method empowered students to see themselves as active participants in their world, capable of challenging oppression. In 1962, Freire implemented his literacy program in Angicos, Rio Grande do Norte, where he successfully taught 300 illiterate workers to read and write in just 45 days. The program's success drew national attention, and in 1963, Brazil's progressive government under President João Goulart invited Freire to lead a national literacy campaign. His approach was seen as a way to empower disenfranchised citizens, particularly as Brazil expanded voting rights. At the time, voting required literacy. However, Freire's work was cut short by a military coup in 1964. The new authoritarian regime viewed his literacy programs as subversive, accusing him of promoting communist ideas. Freire was arrested, imprisoned for 70 days, and interrogated. Fearing for his safety, he fled to Bolivia and then Chile, beginning a period of exile that lasted 15 years. While in Chile, 1964-1969, Freire worked with the United Nations and the Chilean government on agrarian reform and adult education programs. It was during this time that he wrote his most famous work, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, published in Portuguese in 1968, English in 1970. The book critiqued the banking model of education and proposed a dialogical approach, where teachers and students learn together through mutual respect and critical reflection. It became a foundational text for critical pedagogy, influencing educators worldwide. International work and exile, 1970s. In 1969, Freire accepted a visiting professorship at Harvard University in the United States, where he taught at the Center for Studies in Education and Development. His time in the U.S. exposed him to new audiences, but he felt disconnected from the grassroots struggles he was passionate about. In 1970, he moved to Geneva, Switzerland, to work with the World Council of Churches, where he served as an educational consultant for developing countries, particularly in Africa and Latin America. During the 1970s, Freire traveled extensively, advising governments and organizations in countries like Guinea-Bissau, Mozambique, and Tanzania on literacy and education programs. His work in post-colonial African nations focused on using education to support newly independent societies in building democratic institutions. He also published additional works, such as Education for Critical Consciousness, 1973, which expanded on his theories of conscientization and transformative education. Freire's ideas gained global recognition, but he faced criticism from both conservatives, who saw his work as radical, and some leftists, who argued his methods were not revolutionary enough. Despite this, his emphasis on dialogue, empowerment, and humanization resonated with educators, activists, and scholars worldwide. Returned to Brazil in later years, 1980s-1997. In 1980, after Brazil's military regime began to liberalize, Freire was granted amnesty and returned to his homeland. He settled in São Paulo and joined the Workers' Party, Partido dos Trabalhadores, or PT, a left-wing political party. In 1989, he was appointed Secretary of Education for the city of São Paulo under a PT administration. In this role, he implemented reforms to promote popular education, including teacher training programs and curricula that emphasized critical thinking and community involvement. Freire continued writing and lecturing, producing works like Pedagogy of Hope, 1992, a reflection on his earlier ideas, and Pedagogy of Freedom, published posthumously in 1998. These books addressed criticisms of his work and expanded his vision of education as a practice of liberation and ethical responsibility. In 1988, Freire's wife, Elza, passed away, a significant personal loss. He later married Ana Maria Araujo, a former student and educator who collaborated with him on his later projects. Despite health challenges, including heart issues, Freire remained active in educational and political circles until his death. Paulo Freire died of a heart attack on May 2, 1997, in São Paulo, at the age of 75. Legacy and impact. Paulo Freire's work has had a profound and lasting impact on education, social theory, and activism. His concept of critical pedagogy has influenced fields beyond education, including sociology, anthropology, and political science. Pedagogy of the Oppressed remains a seminal text, translated into dozens of languages and used in teacher training programs worldwide. Freire's ideas inspired movements for social justice, particularly in Latin America, Africa, and marginalized communities globally. His emphasis on dialogue, empowerment, and critical consciousness continues to shape progressive education models, community organizing, and participatory democracy. In Brazil, his legacy is celebrated through institutions like the Paulo Freire Institute, and his methods are still used in adult literacy programs. However, Freire's work has not been without controversy. Critics have argued that his ideas are overly idealistic or difficult to implement in rigid educational systems. Others have debated the political implications of his work, particularly its Marxist influences. Nonetheless, his vision of education as a tool for liberation remains a powerful framework for addressing inequality and injustice.